I answered the ad because I needed $12,000 by March, and because Montana sounded far enough from Philadelphia that no one would call asking questions. The estate manager's email arrived within an hour. Brief, professional. A winter caretaking position at a private property 40 miles west of Shelby, room and board included, cellular service unreliable, 12-week contract with possibility of extension. The pay broke down to exactly what I needed plus $800 buffer. I wrote back before I could reconsider. The phone interview lasted 9 minutes. The woman identified herself only as Mrs. Carver. Her questions focused on practical matters. Could I operate a diesel generator? Had I ever maintained a boiler system? Was I comfortable with isolation? Did I have outstanding warrants or unpaid child support? She did not ask why I needed the job. When I said I could start within a week, she said that would be acceptable and that someone named Harris would meet me at the Shelby bus depot on the 16th. I sold my car to cover rent I owed and bought a Greyhound ticket. The bus reached Shelby 11 minutes past 2 on a Thursday afternoon under a sky the color of old bone. Harris turned out to be a man near 70 in a canvas ranch coat and a cap with a feed company logo worn nearly blank. He looked at my license, checked my name against a piece of paper, and carried one of my bags to a Ford pickup that predated me by a decade. We drove west on Route 44 for 30 minutes without speaking. The land spread flat and pale, stubbled fields broken by fence lines and the occasional farmhouse set back from the road. Snow had fallen recently, but not deeply. I watched the odometer. At the 28-mile mark, Harris turned north onto an unmarked gravel road. Cell service cuts out in about 2 miles, he said. Doesn't come back until you're halfway to Shelby. Understood. Satellite phone at the house. Only use it for emergencies. Mrs. Carver checks the call log. The gravel road climbed gradually through low hills scattered with juniper and sagebrush. We passed no other vehicles. At a fork marked by a metal post painted white, Harris bore left. 3 miles later, the road curved around a stand of cottonwoods and the estate appeared. The main house stood 3 stories, built from dark stone with steep rooflines and narrow windows. 2 wings extended from the central structure at odd angles, giving the impression of something that had grown rather than been designed. A detached garage sat 100 yards to the east. Beyond that, I saw a greenhouse with clouded glass panels and a smaller outbuilding I would later learn was the generator shed. The entire property was ringed by a fence of iron posts and wire that looked decorative rather than functional. Harris parked near a side entrance. He handed me a ring with 12 keys, each tagged with a number burned into a small wooden disc. Key 1 is this door. Key 2 is the kitchen. Key 3 is your quarters. The rest are on the chart inside. He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. Radio schedule. Mrs. Carver expects check-in at 8 in the morning and 8 at night. Channel 6 only. Use the call sign on the sheet. I unfolded the paper. The call sign was Waypoint. Generator runs on a timer, Harris continued. Diesel tank behind the shed. You'll need to refuel every 11 days. Propane for the kitchen comes from the pair of tanks on the north side. Don't let them drop below a quarter. Supply run is every 2 weeks. Leave your list in the lockbox by the road on Wednesdays before noon. Someone brings it Thursday or Friday. Understood. Boiler's in the basement. Thermostat in the main hall. Don't set it above 62. Pipes are old. He looked at the house, then back at me. You'll find the operational guidelines in the kitchen. Mrs. Carver said to tell you they're not suggestions. I'll read them. Read them tonight. Follow them exactly. He met my eyes for the first time since Shelby. People who follow the guidelines finish their contracts. People who don't usually leave early. How early? First week, mostly. He climbed back into the truck. Radio check tonight at 8. Someone will answer. I watched him drive back down the gravel road until the sound of the engine faded completely. The wind moved through the cottonwoods with a dry, rattling sound. I picked up my bags and went inside. The kitchen occupied the rear of the east wing. It smelled of old wood and something faintly chemical I couldn't identify. The appliances were newer than the house but still dated, a gas range with cast iron grates and a refrigerator that hummed loudly. A table with 4 chairs sat beneath a window that looked out on the generator shed and the hills beyond. The guidelines sat in the center of the table inside a blue 3-ring binder. I made coffee using grounds I found in the freezer and opened the binder. The first page was handwritten in black ink, the letters small and precise. Operational Guidelines for Estate Caretaker Revision. 7 January 2024, read completely before beginning duties. Deviation from these guidelines will result in immediate contract termination and forfeiture of all compensation. The numbered list began on the second page. 1. Maintain radio contact at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. daily using channel 6 and call sign Waypoint. Transmissions must not exceed 3 minutes. If you receive no answer after 2 attempts, wait 12 hours and try again. Do not use any other channel. 2. Lock all exterior doors by 9 p.m., check locks at 10 p.m. and again at 2 a.m. Key 1 opens the kitchen door. Key 2 opens the side entrance to the main hall. Key 4 opens the library door. Key 7 opens the greenhouse. Do not unlock any exterior door between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. for any reason. 3. Between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., remain in your quarters or the kitchen only. Do not enter the main hall, the library, the second-floor corridors, or the west wing during these hours. 4. If you hear knocking at any exterior door between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., do not answer and do not approach the door. If knocking persists, move to the kitchen and close the interior door. 5. The greenhouse is accessible from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. only. If you observe movement inside the greenhouse outside these hours, do not investigate. Note the time and report it during your next radio check. 6. Do not enter the basement except to check the boiler. Boiler check should occur at 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. Spend no more than 10 minutes in the basement during each check. If you hear water running while in the basement, leave immediately and lock the basement door. Do not return until the next scheduled check. 7. If you encounter another person on the property, confirm their identity by asking for the current week's countersign. The countersign is posted on the refrigerator and changes every Monday. Do not engage in conversation with anyone who cannot provide the correct countersign. Withdraw to the kitchen and lock the interior door. 8. The West Wing's second-floor bathroom has a mirror above the sink. Do not use this bathroom after dark. If you must enter it during daylight hours, do not look directly into the mirror for more than 3 seconds. 9. Inventory the supply cabinet in the kitchen every Sunday at noon. The cabinet should contain 3 rolls of duct tape, 4 packs of batteries size D, 2 working flashlights, 1 box of kitchen matches, 1 container of salt, and 1 bottle of ammonia-based cleaner. If any item is missing, note it on the supply list immediately. If any additional items appear, do not touch them. Note their presence during your next radio check. 10. If the power fails, do not attempt to restart the generator between midnight and 5 a.m. Use the flashlight from the supply cabinet. Remain in the kitchen until daylight. 11. The main hall contains a grandfather clock. It is not to be wound. If you hear it chiming, note how many chimes and the time of day. Report this during your next radio check. Do not approach the clock while it is chiming. 12. Do not bring personal photographs or mirrors into your quarters. Do not hang anything on the walls of your quarters. 13. If you observe animal tracks in snow leading toward the house but not away, Remain indoors until the next scheduled supply delivery. Mark the observation on the calendar in the kitchen. 14. Every Friday at 3 p.m. Walk the fence line beginning at the main gate and proceeding clockwise. The circuit should take 45 minutes. Carry the radio. If the circuit takes longer than 50 minutes or shorter than 40 minutes, return to the house immediately and report the discrepancy during your next radio check. I read through the list twice. Some rules made practical sense in the context of an isolated property. Locking doors, maintaining radio contact, monitoring systems. Others felt arbitrary or paranoid. The mirror, the basement, the greenhouse hours. I told myself it was the employer's property and the employer's rules and that I needed the money more than I needed to understand the reasoning. My quarters were on the first floor of the east wing. 3 rooms comprising a bedroom, a small sitting area, and a bathroom with a stall shower. The furniture was functional. A bed, a dresser, a chair, a lamp. The window faced south toward the road I'd come in on. I unpacked my clothes and the 4 books I'd brought. I did not hang anything on the walls. At 7:45, I returned to the kitchen and found the radio on the counter near the refrigerator. It was a Motorola handset, older but well-maintained. I checked the battery indicator and turned it to channel 6. At 8 o'clock, I pressed the transmit button. Waypoint to base, radio check. Static, then a woman's voice, not Mrs. Carver. Base to waypoint, reading you clearly. Confirm your arrival and review of operational guidelines. Confirmed. Arrival at 1500 hours, guidelines reviewed. Understood. Report any discrepancies or damage during tomorrow's check. Base out. The transmission ended. I set the radio back on the counter and made dinner from canned soup and bread I found in the cabinet. Outside, the light faded quickly. By 8:30, full dark had settled over the hills. I locked the kitchen door with key 1, tested it twice, then checked the side entrance with key 2. The library door and greenhouse door were already locked. At 10 p.m., I walked through again, testing each lock. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of wood adjusting to temperature. At 2 a.m., I woke to my phone alarm and performed the lock check again. The night outside the windows was complete. No moon, no ambient light from distant towns. I returned to my quarters and lay awake until the sky began to pale. The first week passed in a rhythm of maintenance and observation. I learned the boiler's sounds, the way it clanked when heating and sighed when the thermostat cut off. I refueled the generator on the 5th day, noting the amount of diesel in the log Mrs. Carver had left in the kitchen. I walked the fence line on Friday at 3 p.m. and completed the circuit in 47 minutes. Nothing violated the guidelines. No knocking came at night. The greenhouse remained still outside its permitted hours. The grandfather clock in the main hall stood silent, its hands frozen at 4:20. On Sunday, I inventoried the supply cabinet. 3 rolls of tape, 4 packs of batteries, 2 flashlights, matches, salt, ammonia, everything present and accounted for. The countersign for the first week was Osprey. No one came to test it. On the 9th night, I woke at 1:15 to a sound I couldn't immediately identify. I lay still, listening. It came again. A rhythmic scraping, metal on metal from somewhere outside. I went to the window of my quarters and looked out. Nothing moved in the visible sections of the property. The sound continued for perhaps 2 minutes, then stopped. I noted the time in the margin of the logbook and went back to bed. At the morning radio check, I reported it. Waypoint to base. Heard scraping sound, metallic, duration 2 minutes, 01:15 hours, source undetermined. Noted. Did you investigate? Negative. Remained in quarters per guideline 3. Correct. Base out. The countersign changed to Flint on the 2nd Monday. I wrote it on the card and magnetized it to the refrigerator. On the 11th day, I saw the first deer. It appeared at the tree line northeast of the house while I was carrying firewood from the shed to the kitchen. A doe, winter coat thick, standing motionless. I watched it for a moment before continuing my work. When I looked again, it had moved closer, perhaps 30 yards from the fence line. It stood utterly still, not grazing, not scanning for predators, just standing. I set the firewood down and observed. The deer remained frozen for a count of 90 seconds. Then it turned and walked back toward the trees. Its movement was smooth and natural until the last 3 steps, which it took backward without turning its body. I went inside and locked the door. At the evening radio check, I reported it. Waypoint to base. Observed deer at northeast tree line. Animal walked backward for final 3 steps before disappearing into trees. Time 1400 hours. A pause longer than usual. Noted. Did you approach the fence line? Negative. Correct. Base out. That night I heard the scraping sound again, closer. It seemed to circle the house from east to south over the course of 5 minutes. I stayed in the kitchen with the interior door closed until it stopped. The next morning I found shallow grooves in the frozen ground near the generator shed, parallel lines approximately 7 inches long. They formed no pattern I recognized. I photographed them with my phone, though the pictures would have no way to upload until I returned to cell service. I included the observation in my radio check. Acknowledged, the dispatcher said. Continue normal operations. On the 14th day, the supply delivery arrived. I heard the truck at 10 in the morning, watched from the kitchen window as a man I didn't recognize unloaded boxes at the lockbox by the road and drove away without approaching the house. I waited 20 minutes, then walked down to retrieve the supplies. 4 boxes, canned goods, rice, pasta, coffee, propane canisters, diesel additive, batteries, salt. I carried them back in 2 trips. While unpacking, I found an envelope marked with my name. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Amendment to operational guidelines, effective immediately 15. Between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. daily, check the west wing first floor hallway. Count the number of doors. There should be 5. If you count a different number, do not enter the hallway. Return to the kitchen and report the discrepancy during your next radio check. 16. If you observe frost forming on interior windows during daylight hours, note the location and time. Do not touch the frost. Do not attempt to warm the affected room. 17. The library contains a reading table with a green shaded lamp. Do not turn this lamp on. If you find it already on, leave the library immediately and lock the door. Do not return to the library for 24 hours. 18. Do not whistle, hum, or play music inside the house. 19. If you see your own vehicle parked on the property, do not approach it. Your vehicle is not here. Return to the kitchen and wait for the next radio check. I read the amendments 3 times. I did not own a vehicle. I had sold it before coming to Montana. At 2:30, I walked to the west wing first floor hallway. I stood at the entrance and counted doors. 5 doors, all closed, all made of dark wood with brass handles. I counted again to be certain. 5. I returned to the kitchen and added the amendments to the binder. That night, the knocking came. I had finished the 10 p.m. lock check and was washing my dinner plate when I heard it. 3 slow knocks on the kitchen door. Deliberate, evenly spaced. I dried my hands and stepped away from the door. 3 more knocks, identical in rhythm and force. I remembered guideline 4. Do not answer, do not approach. I moved to the interior door that separated the kitchen from the main hall and closed it. The kitchen door was 20 feet away, visible through the window above the sink. The knocking came again. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. It continued for 4 cycles, then stopped. I waited in silence for 10 minutes. No further sound came. I checked the lock on the kitchen door without opening it, confirmed it was secure, and went to my quarters. At 2 a.m., I performed the lock check. All exterior doors remained secure. I saw nothing through the windows. At the morning radio check, I reported the incident. Waypoint to base, knocking at kitchen door, 2200 hours, 3 knocks repeated 4 times. Did not answer per guideline 4. Confirmed. Correct response. Base out. The countersign changed to Ironwood. On the 17th day, I entered the basement for the evening boiler check. The stairs descended from a door in the main hall, wooden steps that creaked under weight. The basement was unfinished, concrete floor and stone foundation walls. The boiler occupied the northeast corner, a large cylinder of painted metal with pipes extending upward into the ceiling. I checked the pressure gauge, noted the reading in the log I kept, and inspected the connections for leaks. Everything appeared normal. I was turning to leave when I heard water running. Not the boiler, something else, deeper in the basement. I climbed the stairs quickly and locked the basement door behind me. My hands were steady, but my pulse had accelerated. I marked the incident in the logbook. Time, 17:53. Duration, approximately 10 seconds. I did not return to the basement until the next morning's check. The water sound did not recur. On Friday, I walked the fence line. The sky was overcast, temperature in the low 20s. I started at the main gate at 3 p.m., radio clipped to my belt, and proceeded clockwise as instructed. The fence ran straight for the first quarter mile, then curved to follow the contour of the hills. I counted my steps out of habit. At the northeast corner, I found another set of grooves in the frozen ground, similar to the ones near the generator shed. These were deeper and formed a rough arc. I photographed them and continued walking. The complete circuit took 46 minutes. I reported the time and the grooves during the evening radio check. Noted, the dispatcher said. Were there any tracks associated with the grooves? Negative. Ground frozen. No clear prints. Understood. Base out. That night I heard the scraping sound at 1:30, 2:15, and 3:40. Each time it seemed to originate from a different direction. I stayed in my quarters and logged the times. The second supply delivery came on the 28th day. Along with the provisions, I found another envelope. Amendment to Operational Guidelines. Effective immediately, 20. If the telephone in the main hall rings, do not answer it. The telephone line is disconnected. If ringing persists beyond 7 rings, unplug the telephone from the wall jack and place it in the supply cabinet. 21. Do not enter the second floor west wing bathroom for any reason until further notice. 22. If you observe smoke or smell burning when no fire is present, verify all appliances are off. If smell persists, open the kitchen window for 5 minutes regardless of outdoor temperature. 23. The library reading table should be empty. If you observe any items on the table, books, papers, personal effects, do not touch them. Leave the library and lock the door. 24. Every Monday at midnight, verify the grandfather clock hands remain at 4:20. Use a flashlight. Do not enter the main hall without a light source during this check. I read Guideline 24 twice. It was the first rule that explicitly required me to be in the main hall during restricted hours. On Monday at 11:55, I left my quarters with one of the flashlights from the supply cabinet. I walked to the main hall and stood 15 feet from the grandfather clock. My phone read midnight exactly when I aimed the flashlight at the clock face. The hands pointed to 4:20. I returned to my quarters and noted the check in the logbook. The pattern continued through the 4th and 5th weeks. Maintenance, lock checks, radio contact, fence walks. The knocking came sporadically, sometimes at the kitchen door, once at the side entrance, twice at doors I couldn't identify by sound alone. I never answered. I saw the deer 3 more times, always at a distance, always exhibiting the same backward steps before disappearing. On one occasion, I counted 5 deer, all moving in perfect synchronization. The grooves appeared with increasing frequency. I found them near the greenhouse, along the fence line, once in a perfect circle around the propane tanks. I documented each occurrence and reported them during radio checks. The dispatcher acknowledged but offered no explanation. On the 31st day, I found frost on the library window. Interior frost, delicate patterns spreading across the glass. The room temperature was 60 degrees. I noted the time, 10:20 a.m., and location. I did not touch the frost. By evening, it had vanished. On the 34th day, I walked to the West Wing hallway at 2:15 and counted doors. 6. I counted again, walking the length of the hallway slowly. 6 doors, evenly spaced, all identical. I returned to the kitchen and waited for the evening radio check. Waypoint to base. West Wing hallway door count discrepancy. Counted 6 doors. Time 14:15 hours. Confirmed. Did you enter the hallway? Negative. Counted from hallway entrance only. Correct response. Do not access West Wing hallway for 48 hours. Base out. 2 days later, I counted again. 5 doors. The telephone rang on the 37th night at 11:20. I was in the kitchen preparing a list for the next supply delivery. 7 rings, a pause, then 7 more. I went to the main hall, unplugged the telephone from the wall jack, and placed it in the supply cabinet between the salt and the ammonia. It did not ring again. On the 40th day, the power failed at 3 a.m. The sudden silence woke me. No refrigerator hum, no boiler, no ambient electrical sound. I checked my phone for the time and retrieved the flashlight from the supply cabinet. Guideline 10 was explicit. Do not restart the generator between midnight and 5 a.m. I made coffee using the gas range and sat in the kitchen, flashlight on the table beside me, and waited for dawn. The generator shed was visible through the window, a dark shape against marginally less dark sky. At 4:15, I saw movement near it. I trained the flashlight beam through the glass, but the distance was too great to illuminate clearly. The movement continued, a figure or figures circling the shed, not walking, dragging something. The scraping sound reached me faintly through the walls. I stepped away from the window and sat at the table facing the interior door. The scraping continued until 4:53, then ceased. At 6:05, with the sky showing the first gray of dawn, I went outside. The ground around the generator shed was covered in grooves. They formed concentric circles, at least 20 of them, spiraling inward toward the shed door. The grooves were deeper than previous ones, gouged into the frozen earth. I restarted the generator, confirmed the house systems were returning online, and documented everything in the logbook. At the morning radio check, I delivered a full report. Acknowledged, the dispatcher said. Remain indoors until next check-in. Base out. The supply delivery that afternoon included a third envelope. Emergency protocols implement only under siege conditions 25. If you observe coordinated movement of multiple entities around the property perimeter, this constitutes siege conditions. Seal all windows with duct tape. Use complete rolls for each window. Do not leave any gaps. 26. During siege conditions, maintain continuous radio contact. Transmit status every 30 minutes on Channel 6. If you receive no response, continue transmitting until contact is re-established. 27. Do not sleep during siege conditions. Use coffee or other stimulants as needed. Sleep during siege conditions will result in contract violation. 28. If you hear your name called, respond only if the voice provides the current countersign. If no countersign is given, do not respond. If the voice persists, state clearly, I do not recognize that authority. 29. Siege conditions typically last between 8 and 16 hours. When entities withdraw beyond fence line and remain stationary for 30 consecutive minutes, siege conditions have ended. Resume normal operations after a 6-hour observation period. I read the protocols in the fading afternoon light. The word entities appeared twice. It was the first time the guidelines had used any term approaching acknowledgement of what I was avoiding. On the 43rd night, I saw lights in the greenhouse. I had finished the 10 p.m. lock check and was returning to my quarters when I glimpsed movement through the kitchen window. The greenhouse was 100 yards away, barely visible in the darkness. Light flickered inside it, pale and irregular. The time was 22:13. The greenhouse was accessible from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. only. I noted the time and reported it during the next radio check. Acknowledged. Do not approach the greenhouse. Base out. The lights appeared again the following night and the night after. Always between 10 and 11 p.m. Always the same flickering quality as though from candles or lanterns moving inside. On the 46th day, I received a radio transmission at noon outside the normal schedule. Base to waypoint. A trainee will arrive at your location at 1500 hours today for orientation. Countersign is Kettle. Confirm receipt. Waypoint confirms. Countersign Kettle. Expecting arrival 1500 hours. Correct. Brief trainee on operational guidelines 1 through 14 only. Do not discuss amendments or emergency protocols. Base out. At 3 p.m. I heard a vehicle approaching. I went to the kitchen door and waited. The truck was a Chevrolet, newer than Harris's Ford, driven by a woman perhaps 30 years old, wearing a heavy canvas coat and work boots. She parked near the kitchen entrance and climbed out carrying a backpack. "Kettle," she said when she saw me. "Come in." Her name was Webb. She didn't offer a first name, and I didn't ask. She had worked a summer fire lookout in Oregon and a winter season at a ranch in Wyoming. This was her first estate caretaking position. She needed the money for her daughter's medical bills. I made coffee and showed her the kitchen, the radio, the supply cabinet. I walked her through the boiler check procedure and the generator refueling. I gave her the printed copy of operational guidelines 1 through 14 and watched her read them. "These are serious?" she asked. "Can follow them exactly. What happens if you don't?" "People leave early." She looked at the list again. "The mirror, the basement, this is real?" "I don't know what's real. I know I follow the guidelines and I'm finishing my contract." We walked the property perimeter together, though not the full fence line. I showed her the greenhouse, the generator shed, the propane tanks. I pointed out the grooves in the ground but did not explain them. When we returned to the kitchen, I demonstrated the radio procedure. "You'll start your own contract next month," I said. "Different property, about 60 miles south. Mrs. Carver wanted you to see the operational framework first." Webb nodded slowly. "Do you believe in this? The rules?" "I believe in $12,000. She left at 5 p.m. I watched her truck disappear down the gravel road. That night, the knocking came at 3 doors simultaneously. Kitchen, side entrance, library. 3 knocks at each, synchronized, repeating every 40 seconds for 6 minutes. I sat in the kitchen with the interior door closed and logged the times. The fence walk on the 49th day took 53 minutes. I started at the main gate at 3 p.m. as always, radio on my belt, counting steps. The first quarter mile was normal. At the northeast corner, I found fresh grooves, these forming words I couldn't read. Letters in no alphabet I recognized. I photographed them and continued. The east fence line seemed longer than previous walks. I checked my pace, confirmed I was moving at normal speed. The landscape looked correct, but the curve that should have appeared at the 3-quarter mark didn't come. I walked faster. The fence continued straight. Hills rose to my right in the same configuration I'd seen for 7 weeks, but the distance was wrong. At 50 minutes, I stopped and keyed the radio. Waypoint to base. Fence walk exceeding normal duration. Currently at 50 minutes, approximately south fence line. Requesting guidance. Static. Then. Return to house immediately. Direct route. Base out. I turned 90 degrees and walked straight toward the house. It appeared on the horizon after 12 minutes. I entered through the kitchen door and locked it. At the evening radio check, I reported the full sequence. Noted, do not attempt fence walk for 1 week, base out. On the 52nd day, I found the lamp on in the library. I had no reason to enter the library. I was passing through the main hall to check the grandfather clock when I noticed light beneath the library door. Green light, the distinct shade of the reading lamp. I did not open the door. I returned to the kitchen and marked the time, 14:37. 24 hours later, I unlocked the library and looked inside. The lamp was off. The reading table was empty. I locked the door again and resumed normal operations. The grooves now appeared daily. I stopped photographing them and simply noted their locations in the logbook, near the house, along fence lines, in patterns geometric and random. Once I found them on the roof of the generator shed visible from my quarters window. On the 56th night, I woke to my name being called. The voice was male, coming from outside, direction uncertain. It called 3 times, clearly and without variation in tone. Michael, Michael, Michael. I did not respond. The voice had not provided a countersign. It called again, 5 more times, then ceased. I noted the time and went back to bed. The third supply delivery came on the 63rd day with a final amendment, 30. If siege conditions persist beyond 24 hours, retreat to the kitchen. Seal the interior door with duct tape. Ration supplies for 72 hours. Maintain radio contact. Do not leave the kitchen until you receive explicit all clear from base. That night, the siege began. I first noticed the movement at 8:40 p.m. while conducting the radio check. Through the kitchen window, I saw figures at the fence line, 7 of them evenly spaced around the visible perimeter. They stood motionless, dark shapes against darker landscape. At 9 p.m., I locked all exterior doors and confirmed the locks twice. At 9:30, the figures had moved closer, now 10 of them positioned in a tighter circle. They had crossed the fence line. I sealed the kitchen window with duct tape, using an entire roll to cover the glass completely. I sealed the small window in my quarters. The library and main hall windows I left, as I could not access them without violating the restriction on nighttime movement through the house. At 10 p.m., the scraping began. It came from all directions simultaneously, a sound like metal dragged over stone, rhythmic and patient. I stood in the center of the kitchen and keyed the radio. Waypoint to base, siege conditions confirmed, multiple entities inside fence line, coordinated movement, scraping sounds from all directions, time 2200 hours. Base to waypoint acknowledged. Maintain protocols, transmit every 30 minutes, base out. I made coffee and settled at the table with the radio and flashlight and my logbook. The scraping continued without variation. At 10:30, I transmitted status. At 11 p.m., I transmitted again. The dispatcher acknowledged each time with identical brevity. At midnight, I performed the grandfather clock check. The hands remained at 4:20. The knocking started at 12:40, not at doors this time, on walls. The exterior walls of the kitchen, systematic, moving from west to east to north. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. The rhythm identical to the kitchen door knocking from weeks prior. At 1 a.m., I transmitted status. Waypoint to base, knocking on exterior walls, scraping continuous, no visual contact with entities. Acknowledged. Remain in kitchen. Base out. I drank coffee and stayed alert. The knocking moved to the roof. Footsteps up there, heavy and deliberate. Something walking the length of the kitchen roof from end to end, then back. Over and over. At 1:30, my name was called again. Michael? The voice came from directly outside the sealed kitchen window. Male. The same voice from 6 nights prior. No countersign offered. I stated clearly, I do not recognize that authority. The voice called my name 4 more times, then stopped. At 2 a.m., I performed the lock check. All exterior doors remained secure. I could not see through the taped windows. The scraping and the footsteps on the roof continued. At 2:30, I transmitted status. At 3 a.m., I heard glass breaking. Not the kitchen. Somewhere else in the house. A window shattering, the sound sharp and distinct above the scraping. Then another, then a third. I keyed the radio. Waypoint to base, glass breaking, multiple windows, source unknown, cannot investigate per guideline 3, awaiting instruction. Do not investigate. Seal kitchen interior door. Base out. I pulled the duct tape and sealed the door that connected the kitchen to the main hall, running tape around the entire frame until the roll was exhausted. I started a second roll to reinforce it. The scraping grew louder. At 3:30, something tested the kitchen door. Not knocking, pushing. The door flexed inward against the lock. I heard the wood creak. The lock held. The pushing continued for 2 minutes, then stopped. At 4 a.m., I transmitted status. The dispatcher's voice remained calm and professional. Base to waypoint. You are performing correctly. Maintain position. Base out. At 4:30, the scraping ceased. The sudden silence was absolute. No wind, no settling of the house, no distant animal sounds. I stood motionless in the kitchen and listened to my own breathing. At 5 a.m., the footsteps on the roof stopped. I waited. The silence continued. At 5:30, I approached the sealed kitchen window and carefully peeled back a corner of the tape. The entities were retreating. I could see them through the gap, dark shapes moving away from the house toward the fence line. I counted 9. They moved slowly, not walking so much as gliding over the frozen ground. At 6 a.m., they reached the fence line and stopped. They remained there, stationary, arranged in a semicircle facing the house. I transmitted status. Waypoint to base. Entities withdrawn to fence line. Currently stationary. Siege conditions may be ending. Acknowledged. Observe for 30 consecutive minutes of no movement. Base out. I watched through the gap in the tape. The entities did not move. At 6:05, I started counting minutes precisely. The sun began to rise, gray light spreading across the hills. The entities remained motionless. At 6:35, 30 consecutive minutes confirmed. I transmitted again. Waypoint to base. Entities stationary for 30 minutes, requesting confirmation of siege end. Begin 6-hour observation period. Do not leave kitchen. Do not remove door seal. Transmit every hour. Base out. I sat at the table and waited. Through the small gap in the window tape, I could see the entities now visible in growing daylight. They appeared as human figures, but too tall, proportions slightly wrong. They wore dark clothing or dark skin, impossible to distinguish at this distance. At 7 a.m., I transmitted status. At 8 a.m., the morning radio check occurred on schedule. Waypoint to base. Observation period in progress. Entities remain at fence line. No movement observed. Confirmed. Continue observation. Base out. At 9 a.m., the entities began to fade. Not walking away, fading, becoming translucent against the landscape. By 9:30, they were barely visible. By 10 a.m., they had vanished entirely. I transmitted the observation. Acknowledged. Continue observation period until 12:35 hours. Base out. At noon, I inventoried my supplies: coffee, canned soup, bread, water. Sufficient for several more days if needed. The kitchen was cold, the thermostat inaccessible beyond the sealed door. I wore my coat and kept moving to stay warm. At 12:35, 6 hours after the entities had gone stationary, I received clearance. Base to waypoint. Observation period complete. You may unseal kitchen door and resume normal operations. Document all damage. Report at evening check. Base out. I removed the tape from the interior door and opened it carefully. The main hall was freezing. 3 windows had been broken, 2 in the hall, 1 in the library. Glass covered the floor in sharp, scattered pieces. The grandfather clock had been moved. It now stood 5 feet from its original position, rotated to face the opposite direction. The hands still showed 4:20. I checked the West Wing hallway, 5 doors, all closed. I checked my quarters, untouched. The basement door was open. I had locked it during the evening boiler check. Now it stood ajar. I closed it and turned the key, testing the lock mechanism. It functioned normally. I spent the afternoon cleaning glass and taping cardboard over the broken windows. I found the cardboard in the generator shed, along with additional duct tape. The temperature inside rose slowly once I restarted the boiler. At the evening radio check, I delivered a comprehensive report. Broken windows, moved clock, basement door. The dispatcher acknowledged each item. Repairs will be scheduled. Continue normal operations. Base out. That night I slept for 11 hours. The following days resumed the earlier pattern. Maintenance, radio checks, lock procedures. No knocking came. The scraping sounds did not return. I saw no movement at the fence line. On the 70th day, a repair crew arrived. 2 men in a white van, both carrying ID cards I verified against a code the dispatcher had provided during the morning check. They replaced the broken windows, reset the grandfather clock, and reinforced the kitchen door frame. They spoke to each other in technical shorthand and did not address me except to ask where I wanted debris placed. They finished in 4 hours and left without ceremony. On the 75th day, I walked the fence line again. The circuit took 44 minutes. I found no new grooves. The ones from previous weeks had been smoothed over either by weather or by something else. On the 80th day, I received a radio transmission at noon. Base to waypoint. Your contract completes in 1 week. Confirm your intention to fulfill contract term. Waypoint confirms will complete full term. Acknowledged. Final payment will be processed upon departure. Harris will collect you at 0900 hours on day 84. Prepare transition documentation. Base out. I spent the next 3 days compiling notes. I documented the grooves, the deer, the lights in the greenhouse, the siege. I organized the timeline of amendments and protocols. I created a clean reference sheet with all current guidelines numbered sequentially from 1 through 30. On the 83rd day, I performed a final inventory. All supplies accounted for, all systems functional. The grandfather clock read 4:20. The library lamp was off. The basement door was locked. At 8 p.m., I conducted my final radio check. Waypoint to base, final transmission, all systems normal, property secure, contract completes tomorrow. Confirmed, you performed well. Safe travel, base out. Harris arrived at 9 a.m. on the 84th day. He looked exactly as he had 12 weeks prior. Same canvas coat, same worn cap. He examined my documentation while I loaded my bags into the truck. Complete, he said, returning the papers to their folder. Mrs. Carver will be satisfied. We drove back toward Shelby in silence. At the white-painted post, he turned south onto the gravel road. Cell service returned in stages, bars appearing on my phone screen like evidence of the world I'd left behind. The next person, I said. Will it be Webb? Different property, same company. Harris kept his eyes on the road. You'll receive payment within 5 business days. What was I keeping out? He didn't answer immediately. We passed the farmhouses, the fence lines, the stubbled fields under pale sky. You followed the guidelines, he said finally. That's what matters. He dropped me at the Greyhound station at 11:15. I bought a ticket for the 2 p.m. bus to Billings, then east. I sat in the terminal and drank vending machine coffee and waited. My phone accumulated messages from the weeks offline. Bill reminders, automated notices, a text from my sister asking if I was still alive. I deleted most of them. I transferred the logbook photographs to cloud storage and deleted them from my phone. The payment appeared in my account on the 5th business day, $12,800 exactly as promised. I used it to settle my debts and kept the remainder in an account I tried not to think about. Sometimes I still count doors, in office buildings, apartment complexes, anywhere with long hallways. I count them twice to be certain. Sometimes I check locks at 2 a.m., waking to phantom alarms my phone has never set. I don't whistle anymore. 3 months after I left Montana, I received an envelope forwarded from my old Philadelphia address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in the same precise black letters as the operational guidelines. Caretaker position available, private estate, Northern Wyoming, 12-week contract, housing provided, compensation negotiable below that, a phone number with a Montana area code. I kept the letter in my desk drawer for 2 weeks before I threw it away. Some nights I wish I had kept it. Most nights I'm grateful I didn't. I work security now at a hospital in Billings. 3rd shift, interior corridors, checking doors, and escorting staff to parking lots. The work is simple. The rules are few. No one asks me to count anything I can't explain. But on quiet nights when I'm alone in the long hallways, when the lights flicker or I hear footsteps that stop when I stop, I remember the guidelines. I remember the exact count of batteries in the supply cabinet, the precise duration of the fence walk, the sound of scraping that circled through darkness around a house I will never see again. I remember standing in that kitchen at 4 a.m., sealed inside with tape and procedure while something patient tested the locks. I remember that I followed the rules. I remember that I survived. And I remember preparing the documentation for whoever came next, writing out the guidelines in clear block letters, numbering them carefully, leaving nothing ambiguous. Because that's what you do when you finish a contract like that. You pass it on. You make sure the next person knows exactly what to do and exactly what not to do and exactly why precision matters when you're alone in a place where the normal rules don't hold. The folder is still there, I assume. In the kitchen, on the table. Waiting for the next person who needs $12,000 badly enough to spend 12 weeks learning to obey instructions they don't understand. I hope they read it carefully. I hope they follow every word. And I hope, though I know I shouldn't, that they count the doors correctly every single time. I lasted 6 weeks back in Billings before the night terrors started. They came in the same pattern every time. I would wake at 2 a.m. exactly, convinced I had missed the lock check, certain that something was testing the doors while I slept. I would walk through my apartment, touching every lock, every window latch, counting them twice. 12 locks total. Always 12. The hospital security job paid adequately but not well. By July, I had depleted the buffer from Montana. By August, I was looking at my bank account and doing the same math I had done 9 months earlier in Philadelphia. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Different forwarding address this time, tracking my movements from Philadelphia to Billings with precision that suggested Mrs. Carver's operation maintained detailed personnel records. The handwriting was identical to the previous offer. Caretaker position available, private facility, Southwest Montana. 16-week contract, housing provided, compensation, $18,000, a phone number, the same Montana area code. I told myself I wouldn't call. I made it 4 days. The woman who answered wasn't Mrs. Carver. Younger voice, efficient, no small talk. The facility was a research station, she said, location remote, duties similar to my previous contract. She asked if I had maintained my security clearance. I said I hadn't known I had one. You do now, she said. Can you start September 1st? I calculated rent, utilities, the cost of existing in a place where I counted locks at 2 in the morning. Yes. Someone will meet you in Dillon on the 31st, bus station, noon. Bring appropriate cold weather gear for October through December. The line disconnected before I could ask questions I knew wouldn't be answered anyway. I gave 2 weeks' notice at the hospital. My supervisor asked where I was going. I said family emergency, long-term care situation. He didn't press. On my last shift, I walked the corridors one final time, checking doors I would never check again, and felt something like relief. The bus to Dillon took 7 hours. I watched Montana landscape roll past the window, recognizing the quality of emptiness I had learned during those 12 weeks near Shelby. Different geography, but the same essential isolation, land that didn't care whether you understood it. The woman waiting at the Dillon station introduced herself as Carla, late 40s, weather-worn face, driving a Toyota 4Runner with mud caked on the wheel wells. She verified my ID against a tablet, nodded once, and loaded my bags. We drove southwest on Route 278 for an hour, then turned onto a fire road that climbed through heavy pine forest. The road deteriorated to gravel, then to 2 rutted tracks with grass growing between them. We climbed steadily. My ears popped twice. Elevation is 8,900 feet at the facility, Carla said. Takes a few days to adjust. Don't push yourself the first week. What kind of research? Atmospheric monitoring, seismic activity, wildlife patterns. She navigated around a washout. Doesn't matter for your purposes. Your job is maintenance and security, same as before. You know about before? Everyone knows about the estate job. You followed protocols for 12 weeks. That's why you're here. The forest opened onto a high valley ringed by peaks already showing early snow. The facility sat in the center of the valley, a cluster of 4 buildings arranged in a square around a central courtyard. All single-story, all built from the same gray concrete, all with minimal windows. Functional architecture, institutional, designed for endurance rather than comfort. Carla parked near the southernmost building. Living quarters, kitchen, and common room. Your space is east wing, second door. Generator shed is behind the main lab. Propane tanks on the north side of the equipment building. Water comes from a well. Pump house is west of the courtyard. She handed me a ring with 16 keys, each tagged with colored tape instead of numbered discs. Red is your quarters, blue is kitchen, green is common room. Yellow is equipment storage. The rest are on the chart in the kitchen. She pulled out her tablet. Radio schedule is 0800 and 2000 daily, channel 9. Call sign is Zenith. Questions? When do I get the operational guidelines? They're already in your quarters. Read them tonight. Start duties tomorrow at 0600. She climbed back into the 4Runner. Follow the protocols exactly. This facility has a better compliance rate than the estate, but we still lose people. I watched her drive back down the fire road until the sound of the engine faded into wind and silence. My quarters consisted of a bedroom, bathroom, and small sitting area. Cinder block walls painted institutional white, concrete floor with thin carpet, single window facing east toward the tree line. A desk, chair, bed, and lamp. A small electric heater mounted on the wall. The operational guidelines sat on the desk in a black 3-ring binder. I made instant coffee using an electric kettle I found in the kitchen and opened the binder. Operational Protocols, Facility 7. Revision 4, August 2025. Deviation from these protocols will result in immediate contract termination, forfeiture of compensation, and potential legal action. The legal action clause was new. I kept reading. 1. Maintain radio contact at 0800 and 2000 hours daily using channel 9 and call sign Zenith. Transmissions must not exceed 2 minutes. If you receive no answer after 3 attempts, wait 6 hours and try again. Do not use any other channel. Do not attempt contact outside scheduled times except in emergency conditions as defined in Protocol 27. 2. The courtyard is accessible from 0600 to 1800 hours only. Do not enter the courtyard outside these hours. Do not cross the courtyard diagonally. Always use the perimeter path. Count your steps. The path should require exactly 147 steps to complete a full circuit. 3. The main laboratory building is off-limits to caretaking staff. Do not approach within 15 meters. If you observe lights or movement inside the laboratory, do not investigate. Note the time and report during next scheduled radio contact. 4. Check the generator every morning at 0630. Runtime hours are logged automatically. If the hour meter shows an increase exceeding 24 hours since your previous check, leave the generator shed immediately and report the discrepancy via radio. 5. Inspect the perimeter fence every Monday and Thursday at 1400 hours. The fence is 3.2 kilometers in total length. The complete circuit should take 65 to 70 minutes. If the circuit takes longer than 75 minutes or shorter than 60 minutes, return to your quarters immediately and report via radio. 6. Water pressure should remain constant. If you observe pressure fluctuations, check the pump house gauge. Normal range is 40 to 60 psi. If the gauge reads above 80 or below 20, shut down the pump using the red lever and report via radio. Do not attempt repairs. 7. The equipment storage building contains research instruments that must not be touched. Monthly inventory is conducted via visual inspection only. Count items, do not move them. There should be 12 metal cases, 8 plastic containers, and 1 wooden crate. If counts differ, report via radio. 8. Between 2200 and 0500 hours, remain in the living quarters building. Do not exit for any reason except emergency conditions as defined in Protocol 27. 9. If you hear knocking on any exterior door between sunset and sunrise, do not answer. Do not approach the door. If knocking persists for more than 5 minutes, move to the interior bathroom, close the door, and wait until sunrise. 10. The common room contains monitoring equipment that records seismic activity. Do not touch this equipment. If you observe the needle moving outside scheduled research windows, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 0900 to 1500 hours, note the time and report via radio. 11. Every Wednesday at noon, verify the well cap is secure. The cap has 4 bolts. All 4 must be tight. Use the wrench from the equipment storage yellow locker. If you find any bolt loosened, tighten it immediately and report via radio. 12. Animal tracks near the facility are common. Elk, deer, mountain lion, bear. Do not follow tracks. Do not investigate animal sounds at night. If you observe tracks that appear human but occur in impossible locations. Roof lines, vertical walls, crossing areas with no access, photograph them and report via radio. 13. The tree line should remain at a consistent distance from the facility perimeter. If the tree line appears closer or farther than normal, do not approach it. Mark the observation with date and time. Report via radio. 14. Supply deliveries occur every 10 days. Delivery personnel will leave supplies at the southern gate between 0800 and 1000 hours. Wait 30 minutes after observing the delivery vehicle departure before collecting supplies. Do not interact with delivery personnel. 15. If you observe people near the facility who are not scheduled delivery personnel, do not approach them. Return to the living quarters immediately. Lock all doors. Contact dispatch via radio and await instructions. 16. Sunset and sunrise times change throughout the contract period. Verify current times weekly using the almanac in the kitchen. Adjust your schedule accordingly. All time-specific protocols are based on actual sunset-sunrise, not clock time. 17. The main laboratory has an emergency alarm. If you hear the alarm, continuous siren, 3-second intervals, This constitutes Code Red emergency conditions. Seal yourself in your quarters. Do not exit until you receive radio clearance. Code Red protocols supersede all other protocols. 18. Keep a daily log. Record generator hours, water pressure, weather conditions, perimeter fence walk duration, and any anomalies. Log entries must be completed by 2100 hours each day. 19. Do not bring personal computers, tablets, or communication devices other than your personal phone. Do not attempt to establish internet or cellular communication from the facility. The nearest cell tower is 43 kilometers east. Your phone will not function here. 20. If the power fails, generator restart procedures are posted in the generator shed. Do not restart the generator between midnight and 0400 hours unless specifically instructed via radio during emergency conditions. I read through the list twice, then continued to the next page. Environmental protocols. 21. Snow is expected from October through May. Maintain clear paths between buildings. Shovels and salt are stored in equipment building green locker. Path clearing should occur by 0700 hours after any snowfall. 22. Lightning is common during September and October. If lightning strikes occur within 1 kilometer, cease all outdoor activities immediately. Return to living quarters. Unplug all non-essential electrical equipment. Wait 60 minutes after the last strike before resuming activities. 23. If you observe Aurora Borealis visible from the facility, photograph it and record the time. Aurora at this latitude are rare and require reporting to the research team. 24. Temperature can drop below -20 Fahrenheit. Ensure adequate heating fuel. Propane consumption should average 8 gallons per day during winter months. Refill from main tanks when quarters tanks drop below 1/4 capacity. 25. If ice forms on the interior of windows, this indicates heating system malfunction. Report via radio immediately. Do not attempt repairs. Use supplemental electric heaters until technicians arrive. 26. Wildlife may approach the facility during severe weather. Do not feed animals. Do not open doors if animals are visible in the courtyard. Wait until they depart naturally. Emergency protocols. 27. Emergency conditions are defined as Code Red alarm, injury requiring medical evacuation, fire, complete generator failure during winter months, or perimeter breach by unauthorized persons. In any emergency, contact dispatch immediately on Channel 9. If no response, switch to Channel 16 and broadcast emergency traffic. 28. Medical supplies are in the common room, red cabinet. Contents include first aid kit, emergency blanket, flares, satellite phone, emergencies only, and emergency rations. Do not use satellite phone except in life-threatening situations. Each call costs $400, deducted from final compensation. 29. Evacuation routes are marked with reflective orange markers. Primary route follows the access road southeast. Secondary route follows the Ridgeline Trail northwest. Use secondary route only if primary is blocked. Emergency beacon is in equipment storage, blue locker. Activate only during true emergency requiring rescue. 30. In the event of facility lockdown, seal all exterior doors and windows. Ration food and water for 14 days. Maintain radio schedule. Do not exit living quarters until you receive specific all-clear code via radio. Current all-clear code is Granite 7. I closed the binder and looked out the window. The sun was setting behind the western peaks, light draining rapidly from the valley. The courtyard was empty. The laboratory building sat dark and silent across from me, 15 meters away, close enough to see details of the door and windows, but far enough that protocols forbade approach. I unpacked my clothes, arranged my books on the small shelf, and made dinner from the supplies I found in the kitchen. Canned chili, crackers, instant coffee. I ate alone at the table, then returned to my quarters. At 8 p.m., I performed my first radio check. Zenith to base, radio check. Static, then a male voice, older, calm. Base to Zenith, reading you clearly. Confirm your arrival and review of operational protocols. Confirmed, arrival at 1300 hours. Protocols reviewed completely. Understood. Generator check at 0630 tomorrow. First perimeter walk Thursday at 1400 hours. Base out. I locked my door with the red-tagged key, tested it twice, and prepared for bed. The altitude kept me from sleeping deeply. I drifted in and out, aware of wind against the building, the settling of concrete, the hum of the electric heater. At some point past midnight, I woke to complete silence and the sensation that something had changed. I got up and looked out the window. The courtyard was filled with fog, dense, low to the ground, moving slowly from west to east. Not unusual for mountain valleys. I watched it drift past the window, obscuring the other buildings, reducing visibility to perhaps 20 meters. Then I saw the footprints. They crossed the courtyard diagonally, visible as dark impressions in the fog-wet concrete, human footprints, barefoot, moving from the laboratory building toward the living quarters. They stopped at the perimeter path, precisely at the point where the path would require a choice of direction. I checked my phone. 2:30 a.m. The courtyard was off limits from 1800 to 0600 hours. I stayed at the window and watched. The fog continued its slow drift. The footprints remained visible for another 10 minutes, then faded as the concrete dried. By 3 a.m., the fog had cleared and the courtyard was empty again. I noted the observation in my logbook and went back to bed. At 6:30, I performed the generator check. The machine sat in a concrete shed 30 meters behind the main laboratory, humming steadily. Gauges showing normal ranges. I checked the hour meter. It showed an increase of exactly 24 hours since installation, which meant this was baseline. I recorded the number and returned to the living quarters. The first perimeter fence walk came on Thursday at 2 p.m. The fence was chain link, 8 feet tall, topped with 3 strands of barbed wire. It enclosed the entire valley floor, running from tree line to tree line in a rough circle. Gates existed at 4 compass points, all locked with the orange-tagged keys. I started at the southern gate and proceeded clockwise, counting steps. The path was clear, hard-packed dirt worn smooth by previous caretakers. The fence was intact. I saw elk tracks paralleling the path on the outside, fresh enough to show detail. At the eastern section, I found where something had tested the fence, bending the chain link inward but not breaking it. I photographed the damage and continued. The complete circuit took 68 minutes. I reported the duration and the fence damage during the evening radio check. Acknowledged, the dispatcher said. Fence damage is expected. Note location. Repair crew will address during quarterly maintenance. The pattern established itself quickly. Generator checks, water pressure monitoring, path clearing when it snowed, perimeter walks twice weekly. The facility was more demanding than the estate, the protocols more technical, but the underlying logic was identical. Observe, document, obey. The footprints appeared 3 more times during the first 2 weeks, always at night, always crossing the courtyard diagonally, always barefoot. I photographed them and reported them during radio checks. Noted, the dispatcher said each time. Continue normal operations. On the 19th day, I found the well cap loosened. Not all 4 bolts. Just one, the northwestern bolt, backed out precisely 3 full turns. I tightened it with the wrench and reported it during the noon radio check outside the normal schedule. Base to Zenith, acknowledged. This is expected. Verify all 4 bolts are secure. Confirm. All 4 bolts now secure. Understood. Base out. On the 22nd day, the first snow came. 6 inches overnight, heavy and wet. I cleared the paths by 7 a.m., working in the dark with a headlamp, creating corridors of accessibility between the buildings. The courtyard I left alone. The perimeter path was outside my duties during snow events. That night I heard something on the roof. Not footsteps exactly, more like something being dragged. Heavy, scraping across the concrete roof of the living quarters. It moved from the east end to the west end, then back, then stopped. I noted the time, 11:40 p.m., and waited. The sound did not recur. At the morning radio check, I reported it. Acknowledged. Roof inspections are conducted during quarterly maintenance. Note any visible damage from ground level. Base out. I checked from outside. No visible damage. No marks in the snow on the roof. No way to access the roof without a ladder and no ladder in the equipment storage. The perimeter fence walk on Monday took 73 minutes. I walked the same pace as previous circuits, counted my steps carefully. But the distance seemed longer, the fence extending farther before curving back toward the starting point. I checked landmarks, specific trees, rock formations, and found them in the expected positions, but the time was wrong. I reported the discrepancy during the evening check. Base to zenith, acknowledged. Do not attempt fence walk for 72 hours. Base out. On the 31st day, I found items in the equipment storage that weren't on the inventory list. I had conducted monthly visual inspection, counting cases and containers as protocol required. 12 metal cases, 8 plastic containers, 1 wooden crate, all present. But in the back corner, partially hidden behind the wooden crate, I found a canvas bag that hadn't been there previously. I didn't touch it. I photographed it and reported it during the next radio check. Describe the bag. Canvas, military-style duffel, olive drab, approximately 60 centimeters long. Location is behind the wooden crate in the northwest corner. A pause, longer than usual. Do not touch the bag. Do not move the wooden crate. Lock the equipment storage and do not enter it until you receive clearance. Base out. I locked the building with the yellow tag key and stayed away from it for 3 days. On the 4th day, I received radio clearance. Base to zenith. You may resume equipment storage access. The canvas bag has been removed. Continue normal inventory procedures. Base out. I unlocked the building and checked. The bag was gone. The deliveries came every 10 days like clockwork. A white van, different driver each time, leaving supplies at the southern gate. I watched from the window of my quarters, waiting the required 30 minutes, then collected the boxes. Food, propane, diesel, batteries, salt. On the 4th delivery, I found an envelope marked with my name. Inside was a single sheet. Protocol amendments effective immediately. 31. Between 0200 and 0400 hours, do not look out your window. If you wake during this period, remain in bed or move to the interior bathroom. Do not observe the courtyard. 32. If you find your logbook has entries you did not write, do not erase them. Photograph the entries and report via radio. Continue logging normally. 33. The access road should remain snow-covered during winter months. If you observe the road is clear when it should not be, do not investigate. Report via radio. 34. If the tree line appears to be closer than 15 meters to the perimeter fence, measure the distance using the measuring tape from equipment storage. Green locker. Record the measurement. Report via radio. Do not approach closer than 10 meters to the tree line. I read the amendments carefully and added them to the binder. That night I woke at 2:17 a.m. My room was dark except for the faint green glow of my phone screen. I could hear wind against the window. I had the immediate urge to get up and check the courtyard. I stayed in bed and looked at the ceiling until the urge passed. At 2:45 I got up and went to the bathroom. I closed the door and turned on the light and waited until 3:30, then returned to bed without looking out the window. I didn't sleep again that night. The tree line moved on the 42nd day. I noticed it during the afternoon looking east from the kitchen window while making coffee. The pines seemed closer to the fence than they had been. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Perhaps 5 meters closer than my baseline memory suggested. I got the measuring tape from equipment storage and walked to the eastern fence section. I extended the tape from the fence to the nearest tree trunk. 9.3 meters. I photographed the measurement and reported it during the evening check. Base to zenith acknowledged. Do not approach the tree line. Repeat. Do not approach the tree line. Mark the fence post with orange tape for reference. Base out. I marked the post and returned to my quarters. The next morning I measured again. 8.7 meters. Base to zenith. Tree line now at 8.7 meters from marked fence post. Acknowledged. Cease all measurements. Remain minimum 15 meters from tree line at all times. Base out. That night I found entries in my logbook I hadn't written. The handwriting was similar to mine but not identical. Slightly more cramped, letters leaning differently. 3 entries dated from the previous week. Day 37. Observed lights in laboratory building 03:15 hours. Duration approximately 8 minutes. Colors alternating blue and white. Day 38. Generator hour meter shows discrepancy. Expected increase 24 hours. Actual increase 27 hours. Day 40. Footprints in courtyard form circle pattern. Diameter approximately 4 meters. Center point is exact geometric center of courtyard. I had written none of these entries. I had observed none of these events. I photographed the pages and reported them immediately via emergency radio contact. Base to zenith understood. This is a known phenomenon. Continue logging normally. Do not erase the anomalous entries. Do not attempt to verify the observations they describe. Base out. On the 49th night, the emergency alarm sounded. I was in the common room reading when the siren started. Continuous 3-second intervals exactly as described in Protocol 17. Code red. I ran to my quarters and locked the door with the red tag key. I closed the window blind and moved to the interior bathroom. I had my phone, my logbook, and the radio. I keyed the radio. Zenith to base, code red alarm activated. I am sealed in quarters, requesting situation information. Static, then the dispatcher's voice, tense for the first time since I'd arrived. Zenith, maintain lockdown. Do not exit quarters under any circumstances. Do not look outside. Repeat, do not observe the courtyard or surrounding area. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. Locked down. Will not observe. Stand by for updates. Base out. The siren continued for 40 minutes. I sat in the bathroom and waited. At 10:37 p.m. it stopped. The silence was sudden and total. I waited with my hand on the radio, not transmitting, listening for any sound from outside. Nothing. At 11 p.m. the radio crackled. Base to zenith, code red condition has ended. Maintain quarters lockdown until 0600 hours. All clear code will be transmitted at that time. Do not exit. Do not investigate. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. Maintaining lockdown until 0600 hours. I spent the night in the bathroom, dozing intermittently in the chair. At 6 a.m. precisely, the radio transmitted. Base to zenith. All clear code Granite 7. You may exit quarters and resume normal operations. Expect facility inspection team arrival at 1000 hours. Prepare for full protocol review. Base out. I unlocked my door and looked out the window. The courtyard was covered in ash. Gray, fine ash like from a massive fire. It covered everything, the concrete, the paths between buildings, the vehicles that had been parked near the equipment storage. Depth approximately 2 centimeters, no burn marks, no smoke, just ash. The inspection team arrived at 9:55 in 2 vehicles, 6 people total. They wore hazmat suits and carried instruments I didn't recognize. Their leader, a woman whose name tag read Corins, verified my ID and asked me direct questions. Had I observed anything during the Code Red event? No. Had I left my quarters? No. Had I experienced any physical symptoms, nausea, headache, visual disturbances? No. She made notes on a tablet. You followed protocols exactly, that's why you're fine. The previous caretaker tried to investigate during a Code Red event. He didn't complete his contract. What happened to him? Medical discharge. She looked at the courtyard through the window. The ash will be cleaned. You'll receive updated protocols within 48 hours. Until then, do not enter the courtyard. Use the access paths around the perimeter of the facility only. They worked for 6 hours collecting samples, measuring radiation levels, photographing everything. By 4 p.m., they had removed the ash using equipment I watched from a distance. By 5 p.m., they were gone. The updated protocols arrived with the next supply delivery. 35. Following Code Red events, observe quarantine period of 72 hours before entering the courtyard. Access paths around facility perimeter remain open. 36. If you observe ash or residue of any kind appearing on surfaces, do not touch it. Photograph it and report via radio immediately. Do not attempt to clean or remove it. 37. Code Red events may occur without warning. Maintain emergency supplies in your quarters at all times. Minimum supplies: 3 days water, 3 days food, flashlight, batteries, first aid kit. I stocked the emergency supplies and continued the routine. The contract moved into its final month. Snow fell regularly now, accumulating in the courtyard, drifting against buildings. I cleared paths daily. The generator ran continuously. Water pressure held steady. The tree line stopped advancing at 7.2 meters from the eastern fence. On day 98, I received notification that my contract would end on schedule. Final payment would be processed upon departure. The same rotation that had brought me would collect me at noon on day 112. I began preparing transition documentation just as I had done at the estate. I compiled everything: generator logs, water pressure readings, fence walk durations, photographs of anomalies. Copies of my logbook, including the entries I hadn't written. On day 106, the courtyard count changed. I was conducting the daily path count, standard procedure, even though I wasn't entering the courtyard during the quarantine period. I counted from my window. 147 steps should complete the circuit. From my vantage point, counting visible sections, I calculated 153. I noted it in my logbook and reported it during the radio check. Acknowledged. Do not verify by walking the path. Continue observation from quarters. Base out. The next day, 159 steps. The day after, 162. The courtyard was expanding. On day 110, 2 days before my departure, I found the well cap completely removed. Not loosened. Removed. All 4 bolts extracted, the heavy metal cap sitting beside the well opening, the dark shaft descending into earth. I approached no closer than 3 meters. I photographed it and transmitted immediately. Base to zenith. Well cap has been completely removed. All bolts extracted. Cap is displaced. Well opening is exposed. Zenith, do not approach the well. Do not attempt to replace the cap. Return to quarters and await instructions. I waited in my quarters for 2 hours. Finally, the radio crackled. Base to zenith, maintenance team is en route. ETA 3 hours. Remain in quarters until they arrive. Do not access any other buildings. Base out. The maintenance team arrived in a heavy truck just before dark. 3 people moving quickly, wearing the same hazmat suits the inspection team had used. They worked at the well for 90 minutes, then departed without speaking to me. The next morning, the well cap was secure. My last night at the facility, I didn't sleep. I sat in the common room and wrote the final transition documentation. I included everything. Every protocol, every amendment, every anomaly. I organized it chronologically and cross-referenced it against the operational guidelines. At 2 a.m. I heard the courtyard footsteps one last time. Not in the courtyard, on the roof directly above me, barefoot, walking slowly from end to end, then stopping at the precise center point of the building. Standing there for 5 minutes, then walking back and descending in silence. I noted it in the logbook. At 6 a.m. I performed my final generator check. The hour meter showed exactly 2,688 hours of operation since I'd arrived. The math was perfect. At 8 a.m. I conducted my final radio check. Zenith to base, final transmission, all systems normal, facility secure, contract completes today. Confirmed, you performed exceptionally. Extraction at 1200 hours, safe travel, base out. Carla arrived at noon exactly. She verified my documentation while I loaded my bags. Complete, she said. Mrs. Carver will be very satisfied. We drove down the fire road in silence. The facility disappeared behind us, hidden by forest and distance. At the highway, she turned toward Dylan. The next person, I said. When do they start? 2 weeks. Different candidate. First facility assignment. She glanced at me. You'd be eligible for reassignment, higher compensation, different location. I'm done. People always say that. She focused on the road. Then they look at their bank account in 6 months and reconsider. The payment arrived in 4 business days. $18,000 exactly. I bought a used car and drove to Missoula. I rented a studio apartment and found work at a hardware store. Simple, predictable, no protocols beyond showing up and helping customers find what they needed. But I still count steps when I walk. I still check locks at 2 a.m. And I still wake sometimes with the certainty that something is walking on my roof, barefoot, patient, circling. The envelope arrived in December. Caretaker position available, Northern Idaho facility. 20-week contract compensation, $28,000. I kept it this time. I put it in a drawer with the others and tried not to think about how the math works, how 20 weeks at that rate would cover everything I owe and everything I'll need and then some. I tried not to think about courtyard circuits that expand or tree lines that advance or well caps that remove themselves. I tried not to think about the footprints crossing diagonally when the protocols say to always use the perimeter. Mostly I tried not to think about the fact that I know I'll call eventually. Because I followed the rules and I survived, and somewhere in Montana there's a folder with my name on it listing me as compliant, reliable, proven. The phone number is the same Montana area code. I haven't called yet. But it's December now and the hardware store doesn't pay enough, and I know how this works. I know exactly how this works.